The movie begins with a Predator ship arriving at Earth in 841 AD. A band of Vikings led by our first protagonist Ursa attack a Slavic tribe called the Krivich, keeping one alive to question him about the location of a man called Zoran. Ursa tortures the location of Zoran out of the prisoner, then orders her son Anders to kill the prisoner. Anders hesitates, however, when the prisoner tells him Thor doesn't let people who murder unarmed prisoners into Valhalla, and that Anders' dreams will be haunted by the prisoner. Ursa shuts the prisoner up by chopping him in half with an axe, all while the Predator ship, now cloaked, spies on the Vikings from above. Later, around a campfire, Ursa tells Anders what happened to his grandfather, her father, Einar. When Ursa was a child, a battle between the Krivich and Vikings resulted in Einar being wounded and at the mercy of Zoran. Zoran gave Einar an ultimatum. Either he dies by Ursa's hand and she will be spared, or Zoran will kill both him and his daughter. Einar thus made her hold onto a dagger as he plunged it into his chest, technically dying by her hand. Zoran kept his word and left Ursa crying over her father's dead body. Also, before his death, Einar told her to avenge him, just like Ursa told Anders to do before their attack on the Krivich earlier in the movie. While Ursa was telling her son all of this, it's revealed a cloaked predator in the trees has been spying on the Vikings. Fast forward to the next day and the Vikings storm Zoran's fortress, and it's here we find out why Ursa's tail is called the Shield. Ursa wields two shields with edges of sharpened metal, allowing her to slice, chop and stab into her opponents. Think Captain America's shield crossed with Kung Lao's hat from Mortal Kombat. Ursa's bladed shields, plus what happens during this battle, really makes it clear this movie is going to ask you to suspend your disbelief quite a bit. As I've said, Ursa is able to easily decapitate and dismember with her shields, even stabbing arrows that are embedded into them into a man's face, which I found really cool. Then you have Freya, the only other Viking woman we see, use what looks like sharpened tree branches or antlers as weapons. And there's even a guy in a wolf pelt who uses what looks like the noses of sawfish as swords. Combine them having these unique weapons with Ursa being the only Viking with a shield, with the incredibility of a small band taking on and defeating such a large force of shield-possessing armoured warriors, and with Zoran's large force not having that many archers, and those he did have being on the ground close to the gate so they could get taken out easily and quickly. And yeah, it's abundantly clear this movie is more so going for spectacle rather than realism, which I have zero problem with. I mean, it's just like Lord of the Rings and the spectacle of the Fellowship holding their own against unending hordes of orcs, goblins and urukai. Anyway, back to Killer of Killers. Ursa at long last confronts Zoran whilst a predator walks through the fortress towards them. The confrontation doesn't go quite right for Ursa, as Zoran at first feigns ignorance of who she is, then taunts her, calling her a washerwoman, a coward, ugly and weak. However, just like how Ursa silenced the Krivich prisoner who taunted Anders, Anders now stops Zoran from taunting his mother by chopping off his head with his spear. Mother and son share a look, but it's short-lived as Anders is knocked flying by a sonic blast from the predator, who finally reveals himself. The Viking predator is a lot taller and more muscular than the Yautja we're used to seeing, reminding me more of the upgrade predator from the 2018 movie The Predator in terms of appearance. Wearing only a metal loincloth and a mask, the predator wipes out most of the Vikings using his brute strength and his sonic blasting extending boxing glove that's replaced his right hand. I also liked when Freya throws her branch/antler weapon thing into the predator's arm, and then he bashes her with that arm, impaling her in the head with her own weapon and pinning her into a wooden column. Now the last surviving Vikings, Ursa and Anders attack the predator, resulting in Ursa damaging the predator's mask and the predator breaking a column, which causes wooden beams to fall onto Anders, trapping him. The predator then sonic blasts Ursa outside, where she falls into frozen water, surviving drowning by breathing from an air pocket trapped under the ice, which I thought was neat as it's something I'd never seen done before in a movie. The predator can't find Ursa's body heat as she's in the freezing water, and frustratedly sonic blasts what cover she could be hiding behind in his attempt to find her. Ursa, using her fantastical ability to not freeze to death despite having just been submerged in frozen water, dodges the predator and gains the high ground. Then, using her inhuman strength, she pulls up then drops along with herself a giant metal anchor onto the predator. It has little effect on the predator but does crack the ice they're standing on, and the chain has wrapped around the boxing glove, which the predator primes so Ursa breaks the ice under them, sending them both into the water. Ursa attempts to swim to the surface, but the predator grabs her leg. A struggle ensues, with Ursa coming up with a plan after coming face to face with the jaggy point of the anchor. She manages to prime the predator's glove, and when he blasts her, she absorbs it with her shield. The force sends the predator flying backward, impaling the back of his head onto the anchor and it throws Ursa up and out of the water. Once again showing off her superhuman ability to not freeze to death, Ursa finds her mortally injured son in the wreckage of Zoran's fortress. He manages to ask his mother if she killed the monster, but dies before she can answer. The scene then fades to show Ursa in a different location with a collar with red lights around her neck and a man kneeling nearby. When the fade happens, Ursa is in the same position as she was when she was holding Anders' dead body, and she has the same facial expression, which you could interpret as meaning her entire segment was just her memory of what happened, explaining why the events were so fantastical, because that's how she remembers them. The next segment, The Saw, begins with our second protagonist, Kenji Kamakami, saying,
この葉は共に育つが何故共には散らぬ。
We're in Japan, 1609, and Kenji and his brother Kiyoshi use branches to sword fight and make a paper boat before their samurai warlord father has them sword fight for real to determine who should be his successor. Kenji lowers his sword, but Kiyoshi attacks and defeats his brother, scarring his cheek. Warlord and heir then watch as Kenji runs off. 20 years later, Kenji and Kiyoshi's father dies. Kenji hears the morning bells and prepares to sneak into the castle, which a predator spots him doing via travelling across the river, hidden in a log during the funeral for the late warlord. Again, we're being asked to suspend our disbelief as somehow Kenji is able to stab his knives into the mortar between bricks whilst not being heard by people directly below him. I mean, I know ninjas are meant to be stealthy, but come on, maybe the guy below him is deaf or something. Speaking of stealth, we see the cloaked predator watching Kenji from like 6 feet away, and then appears to intentionally put himself in a position to be noticed by Kenji. Kenji being distracted by the effect of the predator's cloak causes him to be spotted. What follows is a funny sequence of Kenji managing to stop one guy from sounding the alarm, only to be spotted again and having to stop this new guy from sounding the alarm, only to be spotted a third time. But then, in the end, all his efforts come to nothing when a fourth guard on a different tower spots him anyway and sounds the alarm. It just reminds me of the Hitman games, being found trespassing, taking out that person only for there to be a witness, then taking out that witness only for there to be another witness, and so on until you've murdered everyone on the map. Kenji, with the aid of a smoke bomb, easily takes out Kiyoshi's guards, and the brothers come face to face, Kiyoshi recognizing Kenji via his cheek scar. The two fight as the predator watches, and I like how throughout the fight, Kenji ends up going through most of the weapons he's brought, whilst Kiyoshi manages to put on their late father's armor piece by piece. But being fully armoured doesn't help Kiyoshi, and he's defeated by his brother, who cuts his cheek in the same place as his own scar, then sheathes his sword. The wooden railing Kiyoshi's leaning on, that their father sliced a sword into before their duel as children, and had been weakened when he'd just been thrown into it by Kenji, suddenly gives way and he falls into the mist below. A shadow moves behind what I believe is called a fusuma, which has a painting of Kenji's father on it, and as Kenji looks at the painting, we seem to flashback to when Kenji was a child and his father looked at him, only for his mouth to open and a hand to suddenly reach out. Which I found to be a really cool and stylistic way to add some more horror into the movie, rather than having just a bog standard jump scare of the predator ripping through the fusuma. Kenji flees from the predator using a smoke bomb to open a barricaded door that has 3 guards on the other side, who the predator dispatches easily. We get our first proper look at this predator and his gear here. He's more teched and armoured up than the Viking predator, but is more typical in terms of body shape and size of Yautja that we were used to seeing. In regards to his mandibles, however, this predator only possesses the lower portion, rather than the 4 joints typical of Yautja. Most of this predator's weapons, whilst advanced, do still reflect the weaponry of the time period. A spear, typical Yautja wrist blades, and a chain which reminds me a lot of the one used by Scorpion in Mortal Kombat. However, he does have one more futuristic and significantly advantageous weapon compared to those of this time period, and that's his mini-explosive projectiles. Though he only uses them sparingly, not just to get cheap kills. And notably, he appears to have a shoulder-mounted weapon, but at no point in the segment do we ever see him use it. So who knows how advanced that weapon might be? Does it shoot plasma, or blades, or bullets? Also, side note, the expanding feature of his spear that he uses to slice a guy in half I think is really cool. Anyway, Kenji flees across the rooftops and ends up falling into the river, emerging only to be attacked by his brother who somehow survived his fall. The predator interrupts their fight, stabbing Kiyoshi with his wrist blades when he pushed Kenji out of the way or the predator's strike. The brothers fight the predator, who ends up losing his mask, getting stabbed through the back by Kiyoshi, stabbed through the arm by Kenji, causing his wrist launcher to drop its mini explosives, and then blasted into a tree when Kenji goaded the predator into launching his scorpion chain at him, then lodged the dropped mini explosives onto the chain, which exploded when the predator retracted it. All that appears to be left of the predator after the blast is its green blood all over a tree. The brothers then face each other and charge seemingly to carry on their duel. Yet it was only a trick, as the brothers knew the predator was actually standing between them, confirmed when a leaf freezes in midair after landing on the cloaked predator. Instead of striking each other, the brothers slice the predator, causing him to decloak, decapitated and cut in half at the waist. The strike and delayed death reaction is very anime and also reminds me of the duel between the falconer predator and Hanzo in the movie Predators. The falconer and Hanzo charge at each other, slicing, with both their deaths being delayed reactions. It's fitting as well. This scene in this Predator movie should remind me of another scene in another Predator movie, because both scenes involve the same actor. In Predators, Hanzo was played by Louis Ozawa Chan-chen, and in Killer of Killers, both Kenji and Kyoshi are also voiced by him. Kyoshi starts to succumb to his wounds, and whilst staring at the sunrise, says the line about leaves growing together but falling alone. Kenji, however, tells his brother that he isn't alone, right before Kyoshi falls over dead, leaving Kenji the one alone. It then fades from Kenji sitting next to his brother's body to him sat in the location we first saw him in, with Ursa sat in the background, a collar with red lights around his neck just like her. He then looks over to a man sat in front of him wearing dog tags that say John Torres, who is our third protagonist of the next segment, The Bullet. I thought at first the segment was going to be called The Gun, but nope, I was wrong, which was a nice surprise since that is such a rare occurrence. Anyway, back to The Bullet. We're now in Florida, 1941, 2 years into World War II, yet America would only officially enter into World War II in December 8th, 1941, a day after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. John's car breaks down as he's driving around watching planes flying over fields. His dad comes out to help him fix it, starting the car and listening, concentrating to determine the problem is that John had flooded the engine.
Foreshadowing is a literary device in...
Throughout this, John's dad pushes him to figure out how to fix the car on his own, telling him he can't bail him out anymore. John's confused, but his dad gives him a letter, a draft notice for one John J. Torres. Flash forward to 1942, and John's serving as an ensign on an aircraft carrier out in the North Atlantic, repairing the engine of his plane called The Bullet, giving the title of this segment a double meaning. We also meet Delgado and Captain Vandy, who is voiced by none other than Michael Biehn, who now makes the third actor to have appeared in a Predator, Alien and Terminator movie, alongside Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen. A damaged fighter crash lands onto the carrier, and John finds a strange object embedded in the fighter's engines as the injured pilot talks about something in the sky wiping them all out using hooks. Vandy takes Tech Squad out to track down the threat, whilst John uses various tools on the strange object, with a blowtorch activating it, causing it to impale itself into the engine of a fighter Delgado had just started up and then fly off into the sky, taking the engine with it. A cloaked Predator ship watches on as Tech Squad engages enemy fighters, and when John is unable to get a radio message out to Vandy, warning him there's something else besides the Japanese in the sky, he gets the Bullet ready to go out and find them. In the cockpit of his fighter, John does what his father did back in 1941 in John's car. He listens, concentrates, and determines the plane is in good enough condition to fly, which it manages to do despite a rough launch. John catches up to Tech Squad as they've just won their dogfight and tries to warn them. They don't listen, and two of Tech Squad are taken out, one by a skyhook and another after crashing into the Predator's cloaked ship, causing it to decloak. And it's here we get our first look at the World War II Predator, who I'll actually call the Pilot Predator because I find that easier to say. The Pilot Predator is a very unique looking Yautja. His mask is very minimal, only covering one eye and his mouth between his mandibles. And he appears to be completely lacking dreadlocks, which raises the question, does the Pilot Predator come from a subspecies that lacks dreadlocks, or did he for some reason have them surgically removed? The Predator pulls off a number of cool moves throughout his wiping out of most of Tech Squad. He skyhooks an engine with the hook going through the pilot. He skyhooks another, sending the fighter in an arc to collide with another fighter behind the Predator's ship, and then the Predator reverses his thrusters, sending him backwards into another fighter, destroying it, and then resets his thrusters, which then cook a fighter and its pilots. Flying through the burning fighter debris, a drop tank on John's fighter catches fire, and he performs a suspension of disbelief Mission Impossible level stunt, climbing out onto the wing of his fighter to detach the burning tank. During this, we see the Predator use a new weapon, a sphere that when it gets close enough to its target releases a net which does what all Predator nets do, trap and dice. Anyway, John manages to dislodge the burning drop tank just as the Predator fires a skyhook which auto-targets to the tank rather than to the plane, causing John to realise the Predator's weapons target heat. He tells Vandy they need to head back to base, but just like John's father in 1941, Vandy tells John no one's coming to bail them out. They need to deal with this, no one else. John comes up with the idea they need to climb to cool off their engines, which again, suspension of disbelief, wouldn't they need oxygen masks to not pass out? And of course, how would they deal with the icing problem?
Icing problem.
We see another new weapon from the Predator when Vandy sacrifices himself to give John time to climb higher and for his engine to cool. The Predator launches launches essentially a spinning top with red hot tendrils that wraps around Vandy's fighter, slicing it up and decapitating Vandy. Which means, as well as being the third actor to ever appear in a Predator, Alien and Terminator movie, Michael Biehn is also the third actor to ever die in a Predator, Alien and Terminator movie. And he does so in this movie in such a gory fashion, which is a plus in my book. Now invisible to the Predator's heat sensors, John maneuvers behind the Predator's ship and shoots out one of its thrusters. Turning on his engine, John leads the Predator to ground level, performing another suspension of disbelief stunt of flying sideways through narrow streets, and then out to sea into the middle of a naval battle. John thinks he's won when the Predator ship gets so shot up in the crossfire it crashes into the water and sinks beneath the surface, only for it to re-emerge when John heads away from the naval battle, heavily damaged and with its cockpit now exposed but still functioning enough to chase after John. Looking at a photo of him and his father, John comes up with a plan which involves another insane stunt. He floods the engine, essentially turning it into a bomb. Then when the Predator launches a hook into it, John releases a parachute behind his fighter which sends it in the direction of the Predator's ship. John jumps from his fighter as the Predator's ship becomes entangled in its own skyhook, causing the fighter's engine to arc up from behind the Predator's ship and down onto the cockpit, killing the Predator and exploding the ship. Insane stuff, but the thing I question most is John hitting the water that hard after jumping from his fighter and not dying or at least being knocked out. Again, suspension of disbelief. We then flash forward to some time after the war, and whilst working in his garage, John hears a rumbling, and heading outside, a giant Predator ship decloaks and abducts John, leaving behind a crop circle, which I thought was a nice touch. John then awakes from cryosleep in the movie's fourth and final segment, finding himself in a new location who knows how long after he was abducted. Yaoja guards put a collar with red lights on his neck and throw him into a room with Ursa and Kenji. Ursa's not so friendly to him, but Kenji speaks to him and John tries to speak back, using what little Japanese he learned from his military training, but it doesn't work out so well. The door to their room then opens and they walk past kneeling Yaoja out into a gladiatorial arena, which actually reminds me a lot of Dune 2. Also, at this moment, I really thought John was about to say we're not in Kansas anymore. Did anyone else think he was going to say that? Atop a giant skull, a Predator ship lands and the Warlord Predator emerges, who Ursa later refers to as the Grendel King, so that's what I'm going to call him. He is a giant like the Viking Predator, with glowing red eyes, and he's decked out in bones. His axe is bones, his armor is bones, his mask is bone, and his cape is bones. Many people seeing his cape in the trailers theorized that it was made up of xenomorph tails. And in an interview with Joe Deckelmeyer of Screen Rant, co-director Josh Wassung had this to say about the cape. I would say the fans should interpret that the way they want to interpret it. I mean, we wanted to design that Predator with a regal elegance mixed with brutality, and that's what spoke to us about that, and we honestly were having fun imagining where they might have come from. But we really wanted to leave it to fans to imagine where each of those skeletons and pieces of various creatures that he clearly has conquered and where they might have come from. So if you want to believe Grendel King's cape is xenomorph tails, Josh says go for it, no one's stopping you. Speaking of Ursa calling the Warlord Predator Grendel King, during the SHIELD segment, one of her comrades also referred to the Predator she fought as Grendel. Looking up Grendel on Wikipedia, I found he's a character from the epic poem Beowulf, in which he is referred to as Van Eoten, the Old English equivalent for the Old Norse Jotun. And while apparently it's a mistake to translate Jotun as giant in modern English, that appears to be how the filmmakers chose to use it for how the Vikings would refer to the Yautja, what with Yautja being so bigger than humans after all. With the colours translating to their respective languages, Grendel King tells the humans they will fight to the death and the last standing will then fight him. Grendel King also demonstrates the colours they're wearing can make their heads explode, by having a very bog standard looking Yautja brought out in chains and exploding their head. Weapons are delivered by drop pod into the arena, an axe for Ursa, a sword for Kenji, and a gun for John. Unfortunately, it's a flintlock pistol, the same flintlock pistol Raphael Adolini gave to Naru in the movie Prey, which he then used against the feral Predator, and the same flintlock pistol that was given to Mike Harrigan at the end of Predator 2 as a trophy for killing the City Hunter Predator. Ursa's raring to go, immediately attacking John, who's saved by Kenji. Kenji puts away his sword, not wanting to fight, just like he did when he was a child, and tries to explain taking a Predator on one-on-one is impossible. Of course, the language barrier gets in the way, Ursa not understanding him at all, and John only a little. So little, he confuses Kenji saying don't fight her as fighter. I noticed though, Kenji appears to understand John speaking English, so it's not all bad. As Ursa and Kenji fight and John tries to load his gun, for some reason Grendel King decides this is the moment to release an alien beast into the arena. No idea why. I mean, wasn't the plan for them to fight each other and the last standing to fight him? What if the beast is the last standing? Will Grendel King take it on? Or can he call it off somehow when there's only one human left. In any case, this gives me Star Wars Attack of the Clones vibes, especially when a Yautja guard jabs the creature and gets eaten for his troubles. Also, I love this moment when Ursa tries to attack John, only to end up scattering his ammo everywhere, and John complains calling her Grandma. Grandma! She knocks Kenji to the ground and goes for the killing blow, only for John to shoot the axe out of her hand, which causes her to have a vision of John as Anders when he used his spear to save his mother from an axe strike. John starts to tell the other two he has a plan, but then ends up being eaten by the creature. Still alive inside of it, he spots the computer-wearing severed arm of the guy that fucked around and found out. He mashes buttons on it, luckily getting a blade to extend rather than arming the self-destruct. He then stabs it from the inside as Ursa and Kenji stab it from the outside. During the commotion, Ursa loses her axe, but luckily the creature broke one of the weapon drop pods, a piece of which she uses just like she did her bladed shields, slicing the underside of the creature. Ursa and Kenji then slice the throat of the creature and it's pushed by a hoverbike-type vehicle into a hatch underground with John still alive inside. Ursa continues to fight Kenji, wanting to die in battle to enter Valhalla and see Anders again, but Kenji refuses, laying down his sword. Grendel King arms their collars to explode, but suddenly they shut off as John breaks out of the underground hatch on the hoverbike, still holding the severed Predator arm. He beat boops the computer, causing Ursa and Kenji's collars to fall off. His own he must have detached earlier, getting lucky again, pressing random buttons and not arming the self-destruct. All three on the hoverbike drive up the giant skull, with John having the plan to hijack Grendel King's ship. When they make it up there though, they're knocked off by the as mentioned Grendel King. Ursa and Kenji, shield and sword, face off against Grendel King as John tries to figure out how to fly his ship and make it his new bullet. During the fight, Ursa blocks a strike aimed at Kenji with her shield, just like she blocked arrows from hitting Anders at the start of the movie, and then she proceeds to go for his head whilst Kenji goes for his legs. They get some good hits in before Grendel King overpowers them and pins them to the floor, but then he's sent flying when John reorients the ship's thrusters in his direction. As John does his concentrating thing again to get a feel for how to fly the ship, Kenji loses an arm from a spear thrown by Grendel King before he and Ursa get on board. They start to fly away, but Yautja that have now joined Grendel King atop the giant skull fire a chain into the ship. As John tends to the wounded Kenji, Ursa tells them not to avenge her, the opposite of what her father told her and what she told Anders. She then uses her shield to rappel down to the base of the chain, breaking the mechanism with her shield and freeing the ship. Ursa gloats at Grendel King that her boys got away, Kenji tourniqueting his arm, calls John brother, and Grendel King orders for the fleeing ship to be pursued. I can't imagine how far John and Kenji will be able to get unless John's luck holds out and he beat boops his way to lightspeed, jumping back to Earth. We then get a post-end title card scene showing us Ursa back in cryosleep being transported past a weird looking alien, what looks like a human man and then a human woman who is definitely Naru from Prey. And on July 25th, over a month after the movie was released, the ending was extended to include a scene showing both Mike Harrigan from Predator 2 and Dutch from Predator 1 also in stasis. This confused a lot of Predator fans who play Predator Hunting Grounds because this ending apparently goes against lore established in that game. And it also raised confusion as to why Mike would be given the flintlock pistol as a trophy at the end of Predator 2, only to end up being abducted later and the pistol taken from him. The most common and believable answer I've seen to this question is that the tribe of Yautja we see in Predator 2, the Lost Tribe, are different to the tribe that kidnapped Predator killers. And that's the end of Predator Killer of Killers. I really enjoyed this movie. It had great gory action, interesting characters, awesome Yautja, all set in time periods Predator fans have been wanting movies to be set in for ages. For me, my favourite segment was the bullet, but that's just because I'm a sucker for World War II stuff. I can see though a lot of people's favourite may instead be the sword, since everyone's been wanting a Predator movie set in samurai era Japan. Ursa though is my favourite character, with the classic Viking quest for revenge, her love for her son, and I love her unique bladed shield, which was a lot of fun to watch her use. The only real criticism I could give this movie would be instead of Predator Killer of Killers, it should have instead been called Predator Suspension of Disbelief. You really have to do it a lot throughout this movie, but while I call this a criticism, it is a very minor one, since the movie is animated and it's much easier to suspend your disbelief with animation than with live action. If this had been made in live action, I feel a lot more people would have taken issue with some of the insane, fantastical things that happen throughout this movie. I'm very much interested in seeing a sequel, though I'm torn on whether I want it to be animated or live action. I would love to see Amber Midthunder return again in a live action Predator movie, but with that added teaser seeing Mike and Dutch also frozen alongside her, an animated sequel featuring Naru, Mike, Dutch, and maybe even Ursa would be really cool to see. And for Mike and Dutch to return, it would have to be animated, since they're young in the cryopods and obviously Danny Glover and Arnold Schwarzenegger are not young men anymore. I also can't wait to see the new upcoming Predator movie, Badlands, and I also can't wait to do a review of it for all you lovely people. So, to round all this off, my least favourite part of the movie goes to how much the movie asks you to suspend your disbelief, specifically during The Shield, and how we have to just accept Ursa didn't die from hypothermia. Is she secretly a Twilight werewolf or something? And my most favourite part of the movie goes to that one shot of the Predator's hand emerging from Kenji's dad's mouth. Such a cool stylized shot. I wish we could have gotten more shots like that throughout the movie. Thank you everyone for watching Triple S Reviews. If you enjoyed the video, and I hope you did, give it a like to let me know. And if you want to see more, then make sure to subscribe and check your subscriptions tab, not the home tab, for new videos. I also have a variety channel where I post a variety of different videos. If any of them interest you, check them out. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.